Hi friends, I'm Reverend Nate Melcher of Richfield United Methodist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Welcome to episode 13 of Camp Meetings. I'm so glad you're here. The name Camp Meetings comes from the camp meetings that brought isolated people together to build faith and community. That's why we're here. This is the season of Pentecost and we are on the Penta Couch. All summer long we're going to explore how to get active for change in the world, both from and from off the couch. Tonight's guest is Blair Jasper. He is a disability services and guardianship advocate and a former political campaign strategist. He's joining us to talk about this week's Supreme Court ruling against LGBT discrimination in the workplace. But first, new drinks. This summer on the Penta Couch, I'll be showcasing a special cup in my home and trying a beverage I've never drank before in my life. Tonight's cup is this Star Wars mug. Yes, 2 weeks in a row with Star Wars mugs, big surprise. But I will say, I've had this mug since I was in high school, so over 20 years now. It used to be all blue, and it would do that color change thing with hot liquid, so you can see, may the force be with you. You can kind of see it all the time. It's faded over the 23 years or so I've had it, and it actually says it's from 1992, so this is an old mug, but it's traveled with me through many different moves, and it's been a very trusty mug for a long time. So I thought, why not that mug, as I try for the first time, Tropical Fantasy Aloe. It's an aloe vera drink, and I don't think I've ever drank aloe vera, not knowingly. It says, Tropical Fantasy Aloe Vera drink will cool and delight your craving for nature's original elixir. Aloe vera can be traced back to 6,000 years to ancient Egypt. It doesn't actually say that they drank it in ancient Egypt, it just says you can trace it back, but we are going to try it. Oh, and it's strawberry and aloe. No artificial colors or flavor, but it's made with actual aloe pulp. So we're going to try this out. It smells like strawberry. That's the overwhelming scent, and it's almost like apple juice. Oh, there's some of the pulp. I can see it for sure. All right. Friends, I'm going to try this for the first time right after a song with one of our worship music leaders, Victor Zupank. Take it away, Victor.
This is a great old song made really famous by Cat Stevens in the 1970s, but it goes back, 100 years before that. It's called Morning Has Broken. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first word. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the world. Sweet is the new fall sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Okay, we're going to try this Tropical Fantasy for the first time. It smells very fruity. I can see the pulp floating around in there. Here we go. Oh, I like that. It's very strawberry. And it's kind of aloe-y, like it's planty. Is planty an adjective? Get some of that pulp in there. The pulp is mushy. Strawberry is the overwhelming flavor. It's not bad. I just got a lot of pulp that time, which if you're not expecting it, is kind of weird in a juicy drink like this. I mean, I know there's pulpy orange juices and whatnot, but I'm glad I read first that it's going to have pulp. Otherwise, I think I may have been grossed out. But okay, I like it. Tropical Fantasy, aloe for a drink. Traces back thousands of years, apparently. If you have a unique drink idea, please leave it in the comments. Friends, I invite you to pray the breakthrough prayer of Richfield United Methodist Church. May this prayer inspire you to partner with the Holy Spirit in your life. Take it away, Gertie.
Hi, church. It's me, Gertie, and we're going to do the breakthrough prayer. Loving God of all, renew our hearts and minds. Reveal your wildest dreams. Break through to each of us. Unite us in your vision. Equip us for your work. Transform us by our song. Create our harmony. May we embrace your future and be your loving church. Amen.
Thanks, Gertie. Each week on the Pentacouch, we have new ways to live in Pentecost with fire in our hearts and partnering with the Holy Spirit to bring change to the world. Last week, we mentioned the 2016 documentary that's on your local PBS station, Black America Since MLK, and Still I Rise. We started watching this in our men's Bible study this summer, and we're taking it a segment at a time and then having discussion about it, and it is stirring up really good conversation. And honestly, it's giving some of us better understanding about the situation we have today, including myself. And I really encourage you, take a look. You got to watch this documentary. Be part of the action. Be part of the conversation. Don't turn away. Hear from Black voices about what's going on. Fellas, you can join the men's Bible study for this conversation all summer if you like. You can reach out and let us know. And anyone can watch this documentary for free online yourself at your PBS station's website. Heads up, you will not walk away with a simple answer. You will walk away with many new questions. And if that makes you uncomfortable, you should watch it anyway. Fun fact, did you know that you can march on Washington, D.C. from your couch? It is true. Friends, this Saturday on June 20th at 9 o'clock in the morning Central Time, it is the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington Digital Justice Gathering. The 140 million poor and low-income people across the United States are being hurt. And this rally is about sending a moral message to our elected officials, inviting them to listen to our voices, our demands, and our solutions. A few weeks ago on this program, I had the honor of having the Reverend Jim Wallace of Sojourners on, and I remarked to him that in this midst of pandemic, we're not marching. And he said, no, that's not true. We are. He said, check out this digital march coming up with Dr. Barber in the Poor People's Campaign. So that's what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing on my Saturday. I hope that you will too. And if not this Saturday in the morning, catch one of the rebroadcasts. You can go to june2020.org. Go to june2020.org. RSVP for this event. Share this event. Spread the word and participate. This is presented by the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And one of the lead organizers is Dr. Reverend William J. Barber II, who is one of the greatest living preachers of our time. And yes, by the way, definitely take a selfie of you in this digital assembly and march. Do it, okay? And if you've never taken a selfie before, A, you're over 40, and B, this would be a really good first selfie. I hope that you have a great couch for watching this season of camp meetings called Pentacouch. I hope that it's in good shape too. I'd hate for you to lose 20% of your couch. Ouch. That was tonight's Sneak Attack Pun. Sneak Attack Puns are not brought to you by Gillette Foamy Regular Shave Foam. It's dairy-free and not pasteurized. It's just below your chin. Have you ever found yourself demanding something? Was it for something big, like we demand workers' rights, we demand equal pay, we demand an end to racism, we demand the dismantling of gerrymandering, we demand relief from wealth inequality? Or was it for something maybe not so big? I demand to see a manager about the injustice of my sandwich. It is lacking pickles. This past Sunday, I preached on the ever-quotable Micah chapter 6, verse 8. What does the Lord require of you? What does the Lord demand of you? but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Now, on one hand, that's simple, manageable, assuring of the empowerment by the Holy Spirit. The overwhelmed can control how they do this one simple thing. On the other hand, it's complex. It's painstaking, convicting by the Holy Spirit to take the ability to do the work. The lackadaisical also control how they do this one complex thing. Simple and complex, can it be both? Yes. And why? Because, friends, these are God's demands. Do we really want to live in a world where the God who created you and me and everybody in love and with love and to love, do we really want to live in a world where this creative God doesn't demand us to do justice, doesn't demand us to love kindness, doesn't demand us to walk humbly with the holy? Friends, may we all amplify God's demands in our minds, in our hearts, in our voices, and in our action. May it be so, and amen.
Friends, our guest tonight is a disability services and guardianship advocate, and he's a former political campaign strategist. Earlier this week, when the Supreme Court ruling against LGBT discrimination in the workplace came out, he wrote a poignant piece that made me take notice. He knew me in high school, so that means he's got the goods on me here, so watch out. Friends, welcome our friend Blair Jasper. Welcome, Blair.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Nate.
So as I look at the Supreme Court ruling on LGBT discrimination in the workplace in the 6-3 decision, it seems like a really good thing. And I've always appreciated your political commentary and your thoughts on the big picture, but also your way to humanize it as well. And so I would love to know, like, what is your take on the Supreme Court decision, Blair?
Sure. The decision that we're talking about is a case by the name of Bostock v. Clayton County, Georgia, which is how you may hear it referred to in the news. And you'll often hear it if you do watch your cable news during our pandemic quarantines and other homebound stays on MSNBC or Fox. You may hear it referred to in that way. My view of it comes through the lens of being gay myself, of identifying that way, and also of being a person who has a disability. So working in kind of that intersectional identity space. And because of that, I took a look at this first through the lens that it was very unusual that we saw a 6-3 decision in such polarized times. I think writ large, our politics are very confrontational right now. I think the one thing perhaps everyone in the political sphere can agree on is that we don't agree on much. And to hear that Justice Gorsuch and Justice Roberts joined the 4 more liberal justices in putting forward, I think, a really erudite argument about what's called Title VII of the Civil Rights Act was I think a refreshing change, and I think that's part of why you see this as such big news. For folks in the LGBT community like myself, this represents, I think, a step forward, but as is often the case, only a step forward. I can certainly go more into detail about that as we continue our talk, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that in situations like this, we have to celebrate the good times. And I think one of the other things that we're seeing is that during a pandemic where we are so disconnected from one another and so disconnected from the routines that we're so used to being a part of, we're really searching for good change. And I think in that sense, this definitely represents a good change for cis white gay men like myself for folks in the transgender community, for folks who identify as non-binary and genderqueer, and for folks who have other intersectional identities around race and class and ethnicity. And I think as we start to try to parse that and really move toward more equity and equality, what we can always come back to, especially as Justice Gorsuch indicates in this decision, that we are more free when something like this is handed down. And there is just a sense that you feel a little bit lighter at the end of the day.
Does this impact things like, for example, working in churches? So
Sure.
as United Methodists, we are having some struggle as a denomination for whether clergy can be openly gay and serve or not, or if they're going to be let go or other things. And I want as much justice as possible in our denomination. Does this really have anything to do with that?
Right. I think that's a really, really good question. And I think it's something that that your viewers are going to see as this decision is parsed out. I think there will be more conversation about that. One thing to know about this decision is that it's considered a very narrow decision.
Okay.
It is specific to something called Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. For those of you in the audience thumbing through your law books, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act specifically lays out civil rights and hiring justice in employment. And it is specific to employment in public spaces and private business. So it does not impact how a church or a faith community or a charity or nonprofit attached to a church would function or would bring its mission into the community. And I'm aware that there is some friction between people of faith and folks in the LGBT community. But in fact, what I find most often is that as we talk about these basic rights and we try to talk about these kinds of very tough conversations, what we often find is that we actually have an incredible amount of common cause. And, Nate, I know I was able to chat with you a little bit before we started filming here. And I think that we'll be able to kind of connect some of those dots for people, I think, in a way that'll be really constructive and might really contribute to some conversations and understanding, which is, I think, when we're able to do that, that tells us that our politics is really working. It's what those of us that have done this work and have built through organization always try to do when we're talking to voters.
Right. So if this is a step, and then there's going to be other steps to take, including the faith-based communities. So we're celebrating, yes. Mm-hmm. And of course, looking ahead at those next steps, what are next steps? Or are there cases on the horizon that take this narrow decision, which is celebratory as it is, and continue to broaden it for more equality?
These kinds of discrimination lawsuits have to be pretty blatant. They require an incredible amount of proof and an incredible chain of custody in terms of how you get from point A to point B. And as we look at cases that are on the horizon that are going to make this more complicated, I'm aware of one that the Supreme Court will hear next year. They've made that clear to us. That case is called Fulton versus the City of Philadelphia, and it has to do with
Fulton.
Fulton, Fulton versus the City of Philadelphia. It has to do with a Catholic charity that provides adoption services in the city of Philadelphia, and a conflict that charity has come into as regards the city's non-discrimination ordinance for LGBT couples. Which is then interfacing, as we often see, as you mentioned earlier, with the interpretation of Catholic doctrine in the church and a right to free speech and the service of religion. So that case will be, I think, another seminal case before the courts in 2020 and 2021. We will hear more about it, and it will have an outsized impact, I think, on discourse around faith and discourse around equity and identity, especially as befits LGBT people. So as we talk about one step, this is a great step forward for folks who don't live in a state like ours that has a terrific human rights board and a terrific human rights law that protects lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and genderqueer people. This is a great step forward for folks who live elsewhere in the country. It is also an ability for people to partake more fully in the justice system and to avail themselves of the justice system when it's appropriate to redress their grievances. And I think that just means that we're all a little bit more free. And I think that's why Justice Gorsuch approached it the way that he did. We'll have to see what happens next.
So talk a little bit about your work. You are a disabilities advocate and a guardianship advocate by trade. Can you tell us in a nutshell, like, what is that work? And then after that, how has that work changed during this pandemic time?
Sure. So first of all, I really appreciate the platform to be able to talk a little bit more about this. This, I think, is an integral part of the work that we all try to do in service to our communities. And what I would say is that I run a small firm that provides guardianship services and conservatorship services, as well as advocacy services to folks who have physical and developmental disabilities, their families, and others who are in need of supports. So folks who interface with the state and county service system, they may interface with the charity systems. We do a lot of work with Catholic Charities. We do a lot of work with Lutheran Social Services. And they may have another angle or another way in to a system that will provide them supports. And we try to do our best to help either a social support, like a family member, to have the knowledge that they need to provide fair and equitable guardianship to someone. We often take on professional guardianship cases. And when we talk about guardianship, what we're talking about is the ability to work with someone to ensure that what is important to them, the things that they like, the things that they feel is communicated in decision-making processes, whether we push for them to have self-advocacy or whether we work for them because their communication style is a nonverbal one or they have difficulty expressing themselves. We also press very hard for what is important for someone. We talk a lot about health and safety, and knowing what the law is, what the law does, and what the law protects is a very, very big part of what we do. We're often the first call for someone who maybe having a bad day. We're also the first call for someone having a very good day. And so it is an incredibly challenging position to be in. It's a position of great trust, and a position that requires, in my view, the recognition of how much influence you can have over someone's life and where the limits of that influence are. What problems you can help to solve, what problems you can't, and kind of how to move forward in that. You asked me a little bit about the pandemic, and I can tell you that what I'm seeing is more communication rather than less among the folks that I serve. For instance, you might have someone who really enjoys going out to a family cookout every week. Obviously, under quarantine, under the lockdown, under the park rules that the state has instituted, that is not as safe an activity as it once was. And it's especially not as safe an activity for someone who may have impacted decision-making or someone who may have an underlying medical condition. We often see as well that there are people who use outings, such as an outing to a restaurant, an outing to a friend's house. Perhaps they go and volunteer at the local school district. We see that because those options are not available, we have to think through and be very creative about other ways to cope. But I would say to folks that are watching this, I know the pandemic is on all of our minds, and I know that we're all impacted by it in a very real and visceral way. I think the phraseology that's often used is that we're all in the same boat, and I would push back on that slightly, as I have in my job. And I would say to you that we're all in the same boat, but we're all weathering a different storm. And so for some folks, there are small changes they can make in their lives. There are small connections they can make. There are things that they can do to try to get through this. Oftentimes what I find is that we tend to forget about the people who don't often advocate for themselves. We tend to forget about the folks that are most impacted by this. And I would say that if you're able to do so, connect with your people, connect with your families, connect with your friends, however you choose to do that. And if there's someone in your family that needs support or that uses the system, ask them how they're feeling, because you'll find that that coping strategy that you give them, that outlet, can make a world of difference to what they do and how they live their lives.
That is really great perspective. We've been talking a lot in some of these interviews about who are those people who the challenges that they're facing day to day are just that much more amplified during pandemic. And what you're describing sounds like an already challenging situation as you're trying to live life to the fullest possible, and then to have all this compounded on it. That sounds hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a good way to think about it, and something that's been very helpful to me as we kind of are working through not just this, but several other, I think, very, very important, very heavy topics during the background of this pandemic, is to think about this as an assumption that if you're talking about disability, you're not talking about curing something.
Right.
You're not talking about making someone better. I would challenge people to think about this as an assumption that the person that you're working with is living with a disability and is doing their best to manage and mitigate their symptoms. We believe in symptom improvement. We believe in quality of life. And I would say that a disabled person is still a person, and a disabled person is exactly who that person should be at the present time. And so part of navigating these harder feelings, part of navigating kind of this elevated behavior, I think starts from a place of calm that says, we're not here to make you better because there's nothing wrong with you.
That's beautiful.
So thank you.
I'm glad you're doing the work.
Well, I appreciate that.
Some of your former work back in the day, you worked on political campaigns. If I recall correctly, you worked on President Obama's election campaign. Mm-hmm. and other campaigns. Whenever something big politically happens in the world, I go to a lot of different sources to read what do people think, but I usually go to your Facebook because I want to read what's Blair think about all of this. And you give really good big picture insight, but you also humanize it. So I don't know if you noticed, but politically, the world is getting a little heated. Mm-hmm. I got this mantra of, can we have cool heads and warm hearts? Like, what do you think? What's the work we need to do to be able to move forward together? And is that work different if half of us won't do it?
I think this is first of all, a really insightful question, and also in honor of it, a very difficult question to answer because it's a very individual thing.
Right.
We talk a lot about, and I think President Obama has kind of led the charge with Attorney General Holder on this, that we all must be engaged. We all must vote. That, I think, is, at least for me, has been a very empowering way to look at things. I would also press folks, as I have when I talk to a lot of voters. I can only speak for me. And I would say, as you work through this, if you are having trouble in your politics, if you're having trouble with somebody who doesn't see the world that you see, perhaps consumes their news in a different way, use a lot of
I said, by the way.
yeah, use a lot of I statements.
Yeah.
Most people don't feel this way. You don't know that. I don't feel this way. This hurts me. I would prefer it if we talked about it like this. Have you considered thinking about it like this? And there are times when we just are not going to agree. And that's okay. Political assessment that is glib, a political assessment that says these people must do X, Y, or Z can be funny. It can animate a late night talk show. I have been known to be quite glib when frustrated about something. I own that. But I would tell you that if you want to make a change, you steer the change in yourself first.
Well, I don't like hearing that because
I know,
but fine. I will. You're right. You're right. Well, Blair, before we go, it's the season of Penta Couch, and we're on the couch,
Sure.
and I'm showing people fun glasses and doing different kind of unique drinks. I'm curious, do you have a favorite cup with you, and do you have a unique drink you'd like to tell us that you've had before?
Well, I have, this is important to me, Nate, as you know, and I have my Yeti Tiki mug that I won at a political raffle. We have to have that.
Tiki, those are two great words in combination. I like that.
A Yeti Tiki mug, yes. It's the English language is a glorious thing. I would say to you that the best unusual drink I've ever had was brought to me by a friend who, while she was in law school, made a visit to Japan. And we were told that this drink only exists in Japan, which tells us that we all must travel there someday. And the drink in question is the most delicious thing in the world, strawberry Coca-Cola.
Strawberry Coke.
Strawberry Coke.
I've never even heard of it.
It's delicious. It's delicious. Unfortunately, our Japanese friends are the only folks who can procure it right now. But hopefully someday you will all enjoy it just as much as I have.
Well, maybe if we just mention how delicious Coca-Cola.
I know.
Maybe we'll get some strawberry Coke sent our way.
Maybe so. Well,
thank you so much for being here, Blair. We appreciate all the work that you're doing, the work that you have done, and thank you for sharing your perspective tonight.
I really appreciate it, Nate. Thank you for the platform and for the opportunity.
My thanks to Blair Jasper for being our guest tonight, and thank you for coming here tonight for another episode of Camp Meetings. We're so glad you're here. I'm Reverend Nate Melcher of Richfield United Methodist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can experience worship online at richfieldumc.org/live, and you can support our ministries at richfieldumc.org/give. Stick around for 2 bonus dad jokes from my kids after a song from Victor called This Train. Take care of each other out there. And as our band leader John Wesley said, the best of all is God is with us. Go with God, my friends.
Well, I'm going to take us out with a good old bluegrass spiritual. This train. This train is bound for glory, this train. This train is bound for glory, this train. This train is bound for glory. Don't ride nothing but the righteous and the glory. This train is bound for glory. This train. This train don't carry no gamblers. This train. This train don't carry no gamblers. This train. This train don't carry no gamblers, no hypocrites, no midnight ramblers. This train is bound for glory, this train. This train don't carry no liars, this train. This train don't carry no liars, this train. This train don't carry no liars, the truth is what the Lord desires. This train is bound for glory, this train. This train is bound for glory, this train. This train is bound for glory, this train. This train. Woo-woo.
What time do you go to visit the dentist? 2:30. Why did the man put his kind oven? Because he wanted a hot one.